This Sicha is dealing with the pasuk that discusses what's called a mesis, someone that tries to convince and incite others to serve avodah zarah. And the pasuk says, Ki yisischa achicha ben imecha, if your brother, the son of your mother, tries to incite you, or bincha, or your son, or your daughter, or your wife, or your friend that you love, kenafshech, like your own soul, if they try to convince you baseiser in secret, telling you, Neilcha v'navda l'kim acherim, let us go and worship other avodah zaras. So Rashi explains the words of the pasuk, achicha refers to your brother from the same father, me'av. And then when the pasuk goes ahead and says, ben imecha, this is speaking about someone else, this is referring to your brother that has the same mother. And then when the pasuk says, asher kenafshecha, your friend that you love like your own soul, so Rashi explains that this refers, ze'avicha refers to your father. So the Rebbe asks, what seems to be not understood over here is, the pasuk is enumerating all the different relatives, close relatives. Why does the pasuk not enumerate amongst these relatives one's sister and one's mother? And since there seems to be something difficult in Pshutei Shel Mikra, and Rashi doesn't say anything about it, and as we discussed a number of times, that Rashi is always answering anything that might be difficult in Pshutei Shel Mikra. And if Rashi doesn't have an explanation on something, he'll say Eini Yodeya, or something similar to this. So if Rashi leaves something out and doesn't explain it at all, it's either that it means it's something that's understood simply al derech hapshat, or it's understood based on something that Rashi has taught us earlier. So the question again over here is, why is the mother and the sister not mentioned? Seemingly we would be able to answer this based and first prefacing with another question. Since the Torah is mentioning all of these people that are very close to someone, as Rashi says, those that are chavivin loch, those that are especially dear to a person, why doesn't the pasuk mention the one who is dear and special in the most simple sense, which would be a friend, reyacha? Again, Rashi translated reyacha asher kenafshecha refers to your father. So the Mizrahi, one of the Mefarshim, Rashi, Rebbe Eliyahu Mizrahi says that actually when Rashi says asher kenafshecha ze avicha, it doesn't mean that it's one person, reyacha and asher kenafshecha. Rather, it's as if it said the word oi in between them. It's as if missing that word oi. What it means is reyecha, your friend, or asher kenafshecha, or someone that you love as your own soul, which would be your father. According to this, the pasuk does refer to a friend in the simple sense. However, says the Rebbe, it's difficult to say that that's what Rashi is telling us, because then Rashi would have written this clearly, just like he wrote earlier by Beni Mecha. Rashi added the word Oy Beni Mecha, because it says Achicha and Beni Mecha, and Rashi explained that it's two different people. So too, Rashi should have told us over here also, Reyacha Asher Kenafshecha is two different people, either Reyacha or Asher Kenafshecha, either your friend or your father. Especially that the words Reyacha Asher Kenafshecha simply does sound like the words Asher Kenafshecha is translating what kind of friend we're talking about. So certainly Rashi should have said that what it means is two different people, Reyacha, your friend, or the one that you love as your own soul. The Rebbe says, b'doichik, at least we could possibly say that your friend is included over here in the words reyacha asher kenafshecha, but not as two separate things as we just tried saying, that either reyacha or asher kenafshecha, but rather reyacha asher kenafshecha includes all the kinds of friends that you love like your own soul. So it could mean also simply a friend. Rashi is just explaining and adding the chidush in addition to the simple meaning of the pasuk that it means your friend. Rashi tells us that it's also referring to the highest form of a friend, which would be your father. Based on all of this, if this is the way we understand reyacha asher kenafshecha, that it means your friend all the way up to your father, and a regular friend, from a regular friend all the way, everything else up to your father, then we could say that automatically it will include also the other levels, which is your mother and your sister would all be included in those words. The problem, however, is, if that's the case, then why are all the other relatives enumerated individually, and it's only the mother and the sister that we say are included in these words, Reyacha, Shekanav Shecha, your friends that are like your soul. Furthermore, since Rashi explains to us that Pirish that the Pasuk specifically wants to tell us those people that are especially precious and dear to you, so the Pasuk certainly should have mentioned the mother, because as we know, that the mother is even considered more chaviv, more dear than some of the other relatives mentioned over here, like achicha ben imecha, like your brother, the son of your mother, and in fact, even more than your father. And that's why, seemingly, there would be even more of a chash that she might convince the child, the son, to serve Avodah Zarah. We see Rashi tells us earlier in Parshas Kedoshim, when the Torah says Ish imoy va'aviv tiro, that a person needs to fear, and the pasuk mentioned the mother first and then the father, Rashi explains that when it came to kavod by kabedes avicha v'esimecha, it said the father first. Why? Because the Eibishter knows that a son will honor his mother more. Why? Because she wins him over specifically with pleasant words and things like that. So we see Rashi himself tells us that the mother has a special closeness with the child, and in our case, seemingly, that would have been more of a reason why she should specifically be mentioned in our pasuk of those that could convince the son. So the Rebbe says the explanation is, Rashi told us a number of times already, a klal, a rule, diber hakosov b'hoive, that the Torah speaks about and describes situations as they are in the most common way. In fact, even in this pasuk itself, Rashi tells us this. On the word baseiser, that he's going to do it in secret, convince you in secret, Rashi says, why the word baseiser? The pasuk is telling you the most common thing, that the words of the maces, a person trying to incite somebody else, is usually going to be done in a secretive way. What do we see from here? That the rule of dibur hakosav b'hoiva, according to Rashi, is not only when there is a choice to write one of two different expressions. Torah is going to choose the one that's more regular or more common. But in fact, Torah is even going to add words to make it a relevant situation to something that's common, as we see over here in this case, baseiser. Because the Torah could have left out the word completely. It could have just said, if your friend or your relative, etc., convinces you. The Torah adds the word baseiser. So what do we see from here? That the Torah might even add words just to make it the common situation. So too over here. Since the pasuk of Ki Yisischa is speaking about a person that might convince someone else, and what does the pasuk say? Yisischa bincha, it might be your son convincing you, or bitcha, or might be your daughter convincing you, or your good friend, which we said according to Rashi means your father. So what kind of person are we speaking about over here? The Torah is clearly speaking about a grown-up, an adult, someone that has a family, because it's speaking about that his son or his daughter might convince him. Not only he has children, he has grown-up children. Because obviously if they're convincing him, so clearly they're grown-up children. So therefore, if we want to speak about what would be common, what would be the regular thing of which kind of people might convince him, it is only the people that the pasuk is actually mentioning. And that's actually going to be the reason why the sister and the mother are not mentioned. Because, as we'll soon see, that it's not so common that they should be the cause of his going to Avodah Zarah. What's the explanation of this? Says the Rebbe, generally, when someone comes to convince someone else, as the pasuk describes, Neilcha v'navdo elikim acherim, this could generally happen, this influence could happen as a result of two things. One way is that he's using reasons of logic, of seichel, of philosophy, of emunah. In other words, it's going to be someone that has some sort of influence on someone else in these matters, and he's trying to convince him logically and trying to use logic in this sense of neil chavanav techas v'shalom, go serve avodah zarah. There is another way where seichel is not really part of it at all. It's rather more the closeness that you have with someone, that they live in close proximity to each other, they're with each other, and therefore sometimes someone could convince someone or be an influence on someone to serve Avodah Zarah, even if it's without the logical arguments. It's just because of the closeness that they have to each other, the emotional bond, etc. However, says the Rebbe, the truth of the matter is, even in the first case, when the person is using logical, philosophical, debating, etc., again, if we want to speak, what's the common thing that the Torah speaks about? It's again going to be because there's at least some sort of closeness between them, family closeness, etc. And that's what's allowing that they could end up being beseser, in hiding, in secret, and convincing each other, etc. So in other words, both categories really have a certain closeness, family closeness to each other. It's just that in the first one, it's going to be much more in the philosophical and logical way of discussion, and the second one is just purely because of the emotional bond. Says the Rebbe, in general, these are the two categories that our pasuk is speaking about. When we speak about achicha me'av, your brother that has the same father, or your brother from the same mother, generally the way the brothers might be convincing each other, this is going to be more based on matters of seichel, of emunah, etc. So too, who would have even a bigger influence on his child in matters of emunah, in these sorts of things? So again, it's going to be the father. The father is going to have the greatest influence on his child in these sorts of matters. Then we have another category, and this would be the person's own children, his son or his daughter, or his wife. In this case, the hashpah is not really going to be based on logical discussions and debates, etc., because the Rebbe says, again, we want to speak about what's common, it's quite not regular, that the son or the daughter or the wife is going to be the ones to be mashpia on their husband, father, through matters of seichel and emunah, to the extent to cause him to leave avodas Hashem and follow chas v'shalom elikim acherim that he never heard of, etc. But rather, it's more to do with his emotional bond, his close bond with them, to his children, to his wife, that they have to their, spouse or father, etc. However, says the Rebbe, since, as we said before, even in the first category, the one that's going more seichel and emunah, etc., in the secretive way, is again going to be more with people that you have some sort of relationship and related. So therefore, the pasuk sort of combines all of these categories together and sets them up now in a seder of milmato l'maylo, and how close these people are to the individual. So the pasuk starts off, first of all, with one's brother, but the brother from the father's side. And again, if this person himself who's being convinced has a family, we're assuming also the brother also has a family. And therefore, they are close because they're both Yershim, they're both heirs of their father. And as a result of that, they'll come in contact with each other, they have a connection to each other, even though they're not regularly with each other, but there is close contact. Then we move to the next brother, a brother from the mother's side. They both share the same mother. Says the Rebbe, in this case, there's going to be even a closer bond. Brothers from the same mother have a closer bond. The Rebbe says, Kenira b'muchash, as we see clearly. In fact, in some of the Maramakoimas that the Rebbe points out over here, the Gemara, etc., we find that the fact that brothers are brothers from the same father, and they share the Yerusha, sometimes that itself is more of a reason for the contention between them, because there are certain disagreements and each one is worried about how much they're getting, etc. So in brothers from the mother, there's a closer connection and a closer bond. What's even closer to a person, and this is the order the pasuk is going in, is the connection of his own children, his son, his daughter. That's what the pasuk says next. Even closer to that is the next thing in the pasuk, the person's wife. And finally, the pasuk says Re'acha asher kanafshecha, which, as we said before, as the pasuk emphasized, the one who you love as your own soul, which according to Rashi we said that's the father, and that's the order in this particular pasuk. So what happened to the mother and the sister? Says the Rebbe, now we understand simply why the pasuk doesn't mention them, because it is not common that a grown-up person, who, as we said before, has his own family, should have such a strong extra connection with his sister, who again, probably, if she's a similar age, probably having also her own family, etc. So he doesn't have such a strong bond with her to the extent that she is going to be poilen and that she is going to impact him. And Baseiser, as we said in secret, of this idea of Neil Chavanav, to go and serve the elikim acherim, the asher lo yadata, that he never heard about, that didn't know, etc. Says that the same thing is true in regards to the mother. Although, of course, a person has a great closeness with his mother, but at the same time, it's not in a way that she has a hashpah on him in matters of emunah. First of all, as far as in the philosophical way, she's not going to be the one convincing him that. And even as far as the concept of the hergish alev, the emotional bond. Again, if we want to speak what's the common thing, again, she's not going to have so much of an impact, because since we're speaking about a grown-up who has, as we said, their own children already, so yes, he has strong feelings to his mother, but it's not to such an extent that as a result of that, she's going to be able to convince him and cause that he should go now, start serving Avodah Zarah. Whereas the person's own children, his son, his daughter, or his wife, who he's living constantly together with, and therefore the bond is in the kind of way that if they're acting in a certain way, so even again, if philosophically they won't convince him, but because of the bond of living with them, etc., they might have that influence on him. Says the Rebbe, one of the hoirois that we could take out of this is, all of the above mentioned levels in the family, the brother, etc., also represent different levels and koiches and the faculties of the person himself, as midos, as seichel, and so on. Which tells us that just as physically it's possible that chas v'shalom some of these relatives should convince a person of avodah zarah, that means also mitzad all of these different levels and faculties of the nefesh, it's possible that there could be a certain thing as a result of one of these levels that should still allow and cause the person to do an aveira. In other words, in avodas Hashem, you can't just rely on the normal koiches, which we call that which is just based on your own feelings and even your own logic and seichel and so on. Furthermore, even that highest level that we said, reyacha asher kenafshecha, which refers to the father. In Chassidus, that's explained as referred to the level of chokhmah. Now, the Alter Rebbe tells us in Tanya that really, as far as the level of chokhmah of the person is concerned, there's no room at all for avodah zarah. And yet, what's the hoirah that we're learning over here? That even with a person's greatest and highest faculties, al tam in ba'atzmach, a person can never trust himself. In other words, even as far as this level of av is concerned, the chachma shabanefesh, since the pasuk refers to it, Reyacha asher kenafshecha, you love him as you love yourself, that means in some way your own mitzias, your own personality and existence is biased in a certain way. Therefore, you can still not be certain that you won't chas v'shalom end up in the wrong places with avodah zarah, and even from that level there could be this idea of yesischa, of convincing the person chas v'shalom to go against Hashem. The Rebbe over here adds, the Rebbe brings us with a kal v'chomer from what's explained in regards to Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai. We know that Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, before he passed away, says, Eini yodeya be'ezeh derech milchim oisi, there's Gehenim, there's Gan Eden, I don't know which way I'm going. Now, Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai is a person that never went Dal Adamus without Torah and without Tefillin. For 80 years, he taught Torah. He learned Torah and taught Torah. So what's going on? How could he be in doubt? So Chassidus explains that the doubt was coming from, as far as his Panimius and his Etzem HaNefesh is concerned. He wasn't sure on the deeper levels, that which is more hidden beyond his regular koiches, those higher levels, he's not sure where they're at, as Chassidus explains. And therefore, the Rebbe is saying the same thing over here. So certainly a regular person, as far as all of his koiches are concerned, you can never really be sure of where they may lead you or where you may end up if you're just following that. And therefore, in order for a person to be protected from this idea of being convinced for avodah zarah, one needs to go completely beyond all of this to an area of mesiras nefesh, mesiras haratzin, giving himself completely over in a way that's higher than chachma. And only then is that able to impact also those koiches that are beneath that mesiras haratzin and the mesiras nefesh, starting with the level of chachma, the level of av, and then getting down to the level of achicha benimecha, etc. That not only will you be assured that they won't be able to convince you to do the opposite, but just on the contrary, Achrei Hashem Elokecha Telecha, you're going to go along with all your faculties and following Hashem, v'oisis yiro, and fearing Hashem, keeping His mitzvahs, v'koilis yishmo, listening to His voice, v'oisis avodu, and worshiping Him, u'voisid bokum, and cleaving to Hashem.